This is Join Us in France, episode 588. 588. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we take a conversational journey through the beauty, culture, and flavors of France. Today, I bring you a conversation with Elyse Rivin of Toulouse Guided Walks about Guédelon, the extraordinary project where a 13th century castle is being built from scratch, using only medieval tools and techniques. Imagine stonecutters, blacksmiths, and carpenters working just as they did 800 years ago. Why rebuild a castle when we have so many of them in France already? Because you can't truly understand the past until you live it. Come along to uncover the ingenuity, surprises, and sheer magic of this hands-on journey through time. I visited, and so did Elyse, and we were completely taken by it, and I think you will too. This podcast runs on chocolatine, coffee, and the generosity of listeners like you. Whether you book an itinerary consult, take one of my voice map tours, join me on a day trip in my electric car around the southwest of France, or support the show on Patreon, you keep this whole adventure going, and I'm really grateful. If you'd like to support the podcast and skip the ads, you'll find the link in the show note for that. And all my tours and services are at joinusinfrance.com/boutique. There won't be a magazine part of the podcast today after my chat with Elyse because this recording ran long. There was so much to say. But I do want to share a special shout out this week to my new Join Us in France champions, Kevin Bruns, Donna Goldshine, and Carolyn Chase. And thank you for editing your pledge up, Barbara Colvin and Dana Bradford. I'm very lucky to have a very supportive community of Francophiles. In a time of AI-generated content, you can rest assured that this channel is people-powered. I do use AI to create summaries of podcast episodes because it saves so much time. But that's it. I go places, you go places, Elyse goes places. We read books, we talk about it and what we've learned. And that to me is a winning proposition. And I'm so glad so many of you agree. That's why I'm also very grateful for my faithful listeners who heard me last week and decided to become patrons. It's a step that people do or don't take, and I'm really, really happy when they do. To do that yourself, visit patreon.com/join us. That's Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. And to support Elyse, go to patreon.com/ElyseArt, ELYSART. And thank you also, Colleen Butera, for sending in a tip by using the Tip Your Guide green button on joinusinfriends.com. Colleen wrote, Annie, thank you. What you offer to us through Join Us in France is unique and personal. I love France and I'm so appreciative of you. Well, thank you also, Colleen. One last thing before we get to Guédelon. To sign up for the weekly newsletter, go to joinusinfrance.com/newsletter. It's really like getting a postcard from France delivered straight to your inbox. I'll be off to Valbonne in the Alpes-Maritimes for a stay at Brian Tollison's beautiful renovated home and a visit to Provence next week. So I'm going to be snooping around Provence all week. And the week after that, I'll be exploring Lyon, where I've spent a few days before, but not enough. And so I'm going to spend a whole week and joining my husband, who's going to be participating in a Toastmasters competition. But you will still get a new episode every Sunday. I'm making sure of that. And the next one is going to be called 29 Days to France with Stephen Heiner and Molly Sébrier. A perfect conversation for those of you who are itching to make the big move and where you'll also learn plenty about how to get things done in France. Be well and à dimanche prochain. Bonjour, Elyse.
Bonjour, Annie.
We are talking about Guédelon today. Guédelon, Guedelon, a beautiful place in the center of France, in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. I like your expression when you say that. It's like the middle of nowhere makes me think of a fairy tale. It's not really. There's no place in France, except maybe in the top of the mountains, that's really in the middle of nowhere. But in the middle of a forest in the northern region of Burgundy, which really comes to the southern outskirts of the great banlieue of Paris, near the city of Auxerre, in a forest very close by.
Right. So this is a place that you go to purposefully. You wouldn't be just driving past it and go, oh, I'll stop here. No, you go there because you want to go there. And a lot of people want to go there, it turns out, including me. I had been thinking about going there for a long, long time. It's a bit far from Toulouse, but I finally made it there about a year ago and loved it. So I want to tell you about it. So imagine kind of a team of builders, artisans, historians. They come together, they construct a real medieval castle using only 13th century techniques and tools. That's what they're doing at Guédelon. Today we'll talk about, the project, how it began, what it teaches us about construction in the Middle Ages, and why so many people go there every year. The project started small, about 10 people who were hired through personal connections of the founder called Michel Guyot. And they were all very enthusiastic about the project. It had never been tried before. It got talked about in the local press. Local people were really, really excited to see this happen. And it took off. It just took off. Detractors said, why on earth would you try to build a chateau from the 13th century when we have so many right around us that need to be renovated? And that's a good question, I guess.
It is a very good question.
Because we do have a lot of chateaus.
Yes, we have many.
Right. And many of these chateaus, they don't have the funds to be renovated. And so what was the point of trying from scratch? Well, we learned a lot from this. You cannot answer the question of how medieval builders did this unless you try it. And that's what experimental archaeology is.
Yes.
We have a site like that not so far from us where they are reproducing a Gaul village, right? And it's very interesting. And they use also the tools of we'll probably do an episode about that at some point. Okay. So, Guédelon. And today, unlike our normal thing, you're going to be asking the questions.
Right.
But I'll start by telling you what is Guédelon and who started it. So the idea came from Michel Guyot. He was born in 1947 in a family with lots of interest in history, architectural heritage. He's from the Loire Valley, and he had already bought and renovated the Château de Saint-Fargeau. Fargeau, sorry, in the Yonne. And that's a chateau from the 15th century.
Which means it's very new.
Very, very new. Okay. While he was researching this first chateau, he became fascinated with medieval construction techniques, and he asked himself, what if we built a new medieval castle today using only the methods and tools available in the 13th century? And he wanted to do something that combined archaeology, architecture, history, craftsmanship, and tourism.
I have two questions for you. One is, did he himself actually physically work on it at the beginning? And two, did he hire any experts besides the people to actually work on the project? Did he do any kind of consulting with some people at the beginning to figure out what to do?
As to whether he did physical work himself or not, I do not know. I assume he did because the team was very small at first, and they consulted with hundreds of people. Hundreds of people. Because we have a lot of, surprise, surprise, we have a lot of historians in France.
Oh, yes.
A lot of people who do PhDs in very, very specific parts of medieval history. And very often what they do is they study a particular area, a particular chateau or two, or cathedral or two, or a technique. And these people have very deep knowledge of a very narrow subject. And there are hundreds of them. And a lot of them got at least consulted because the point was to do something that would look like a 13th century chateau.
So the project, he set it up to do something in the middle of a forest?
Correct. So at first they thought that he would build this in the woods near the original chateau that he had renovated, but it turned out they couldn't because they found some remnants of an old Roman pottery site.
Oh,
And when you find old Roman things, you cannot build on top of it.
you can't build on top of it.
Correct. So they decided to go looking for another site, and they found this place that was in the middle of the forest of Guédelon that used to be a rock quarry that hadn't been used for about 50 years. And a quarry is a place that has kind of a hole in the center usually, right? They dig. And people had dumped, like, it had become an illegal dump of some, I don't think it was a massive dump, horrible, whatever, no. But people had started dumping like old cars, old whatever. And the municipality said, you can have this plot of land, just a dump, clean it up, and let's see what you do.
Let's see what you can do with it. Okay.
Right. Guyot, being a very motivated and entrepreneurial person, went looking for grants. He surrounded himself with people who could look for grants as well. Very small team, very highly motivated people. Because, okay, if you're going to build a chateau, guess what? You need an architect who's going to submit plans, and you need a building permit.
Right. Even for a 13th century chateau.
Yes, even for a 13th century chateau. So who was going to be the architect who was going to submit the plans? That turned out to be an obstacle. He reached out to several people and eventually found one who was willing to, and of course he didn't have a bit of money, so he wasn't going to pay them a lot of money. So eventually he found one that would do it and would accept to be paid only if it worked out.
So he went looking for an architect saying, I need somebody who can build something that looks like it's from the 1200s, basically.
Correct.
That is from the 1200s, because it will be those materials with none of the features of anything other than the 1200s.
That is correct.
That's kind of like asking an architect to unlearn everything that they've learned in school for 5 years, practically. But I can see the challenge that it would be.
Well, yes, so we have architects who are interested in history. Obviously, this is what he went looking for, architects who were interested in history. And he found somebody, I got his name written down somewhere, but it doesn't matter what he was named. He worked for free for a long time, and he jumped through a lot of hoops to get this off the ground.
And having a husband who's had to deal with urbanism and planning and the official attitudes towards things forever and ever, I can just see some guy walking in saying, look, I need approval to make this 1200s castle. Okay, no electricity, no this, no that. And they're looking at him going, you are out of your mind. Just a question. They used since they built it on a quarry, did they actually use the stone from that quarry to build it?
Yes. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. So the type of quarry that this was, they had to figure out how much stone there was left. Because there was a possibility that they stopped using it because there was, nothing left. And they dug and they studied the land and they realized that there was 15 meters worth of stone that they could use.
Deep down, you're saying 50. Okay.
Yes. So they could build several Guédelon there. The other thing that they had to decide on was how big of a chateau were they going to make?
Right.
They imagined a real situation. The situation they imagined was you are a minor lord.
Okay.
And you have been given permission from the king and from your duke and your king to build yourself a chateau in this area. And these minor lords, up until the 13th century, would probably have built wooden castles. Up until then, most castles were built out of wood entirely. But with Louis-Philippe, they started building the castles that we have in our minds today, where you have the four walls, the towers at the corner, the keep, which is a tall tower in the center. And that's the model they wanted to go after.
Okay.
Yeah. And there were lots and lots of these types of chateaux built throughout France in the 13th century under Philippe Auguste. Okay. So they just defined that this was not going to be a massive chateau with a cathedral, with all sorts of things. No, they were going to build a modest stone chateau.
Basically for the local lord and his family.
Exactly. And typically, a chateau like that would have gone up in about 10 years.
Oh, yeah?
Right.
Okay.
But because they were reinventing the wheel, it took them more like 27 years. And they knew it was going to take longer because in the Middle Ages, you had at your disposal people who were already trained to do this kind of work. They had done it somewhere else. They would move around from site to site and would come work for you. Nowadays, you have to start from scratch.
What about the tools? When they hired people to help work on it, did everybody have to make their tools from scratch?
So this quarry and the stone that they have underground has a lot of iron content.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the stone is very red. Okay? So they built
Forge?
They built an area where they could do smeltering and make their own iron. They really did everything.
Incredible.
Yes, incredible. And the other thing that's kind of very lucky is that on site, they also have water. As it turns out, when they dug a well in the center of the chateau, in France, they use these people who say that they can find water with a stick of whatever. Yeah, whatever. I think that's BS. But they dug a well in the center of the chateau, and 7.5 meters deep, they had water. And not just a little bit of water, but a lot of water. They still use this. So they lucked out. I mean, they just lucked out.
They just lucked out, really.
So they have the water, they have clay. The clay in this area is very dark.
Huh.
And they started making roof tiles with this clay, as well as pottery and whatever they needed. And at a distance, you think that the roof is slate.
Oh, how interesting.
But it's not. It's roof tiles.
The stones are reddish in color?
Yes, they're reddish with a bit of black in it.
It's kind of like parts of the Aveyron that have that same thing because there is iron in the rock.
Yeah, so they really, by chance, and also, they had the land surveyed and they dug boreholes to see what was underneath, just to be sure. But yeah, they hit pay dirt. They hit a place where they can do pretty much everything themselves. Yeah.
So, if I understand correctly, so they hired some experts that were like compagnons, which are kind of like modern guild people. And those people trained other people who became part of the crew?
Right. So the crew is pretty small. They only have, even today, only have a company. So they set up a company. It's a proper French company where people get 5 weeks vacation and long weekends and such.
Wow, that's a good way of living the 13th century, let me tell you,
Yes. So these 30 people call upon different people to do different tasks, but they also have a whole system of stage bâtisseur, which is kind of I don't know how to say that in English, but it's like an apprentice builder workshops type of thing. These are bénévoles, so these are people who volunteer their time. They come there for just 1 week, only 1 week. They don't want people, growing roots in there. And these people come for a week and they are going to go through all the different, like they're going to spend a day with the mason and then a day with timber people and a day with the carpenters. And yeah, they do a day with the gardeners, a day with the painters,
Can anybody be one of these volunteers?
Yeah, well, yes, you have to be they don't take people who are 80 years old, obviously.
And they don't take little kids, I suppose.
Exactly. They mostly take 30, 40-year-olds. A lot of them are people who have very different professions that have nothing to do with construction, but they just come and they're willing hands for a week.
To have an experience like that, right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful experience. One of the documentaries I watched had an American who came. Obviously, he spoke French as well. If you speak no French, you're not going to do well there.
Oh, right. That's true. You have to be able to communicate with everybody.
Yeah.
The entire crew, I suppose, is French. The real crew.
Yes. The crew is French. And so they have very specific tasks. So these crew, you have the forger.
Mm-hmm.
Forger, is that no. Le forgeron.
Forgeron.
How do you say that in English? Like a guy who makes the tools and sharpens tools and...
Well, you can actually say toolmaker, but that doesn't mean anything. No, it's a blacksmith.
A blacksmith. Sorry about that, guys.
Yes, blacksmith. Oh boy. Yeah, forger is a little bit different, It's a little bit different. Okay, that's the bad check you're giving me,
So the blacksmiths, the wood people, they have all sorts of specialties in the wood because when they need a beam, they have to cut down the tree.
It's like with Notre Dame, they had to get the right stuff and do it the right way,
Right. And they decided at Notre Dame to use many of the techniques that had been relearned at Guédelon because it turns out that it works better.
I have a question. I don't know. Were there any specific problems or difficulties that arose during the building that you know of?
So I know that there were never any major accidents. So nobody has gotten seriously injured doing this. They take all sorts of precautions, and they are also not completely unreasonable. So they want to learn about building techniques in the Middle Ages. They don't want to learn about medical things of the Middle Ages. So they use eye protection.
Okay.
That's just modern eye protection. Because the point is not to have the guy, put something in his eye and see how they can fix him, okay? This is not what they do.
Actually, my question was more thinking in terms of if there were any, glitches or unexpected things that happened in the construction, because I know that since my husband spent some part of his work life doing renovation of old things, he said that one of the things is that you always find there's a problem that you didn't expect to have happen,
That's correct. At Guédelon, though, they took their time. They built models at different scales. So they did small models first, and then they made it bigger and bigger. And so they ironed out a lot of problems just by thinking about it and calling all of the professionals, all the PhDs who had done the research to see if they could perhaps understand better how it worked.
In that way, they had the luxury that the people in the 13th century really did not have, that they had the time and they had all these experts to help them,
In the 13th century, what they had was a lot of experience because people would go around on different sites and just learn the craft. But they never had any major accidents. They didn't have a wall crumble on people. No, none of that happened because they took their time and they did things carefully.
There were 4 towers in one huge courtyard. How big is it? I mean, I don't know in measures, but it's like a 4-tower thing with a courtyard in the middle.
Yes, and a big tower in the keep in the middle, yes. They were also quite reasonable about doing they use paper. Okay, so when you go, they do a lot of workshops for the visitors where they show you how to do calculations and whatever. And they do that in the dirt. They draw everything in the dirt. And they draw pretty complex things in the dirt, which is fascinating. But they also had paper. Because again, the goal was not to learn how to make paper. They know how to make paper already. So like pencils, they bought pencils, okay? They didn't try to make the pencils. They didn't try to make the eye protection. They didn't try to make the knee protection. They are very careful about not hurting themselves because it's a small team and they don't want to, they use very sharp tools. So their axes and their picks and their things get sharpened all the time. They have people on site just to sharpen the tools daily, sometimes several times a day. Like in the morning, if you're a mason, you show up and the blacksmith gives you a dozen fresh des burins. I don't know how you say that in English.
I don't know either. I think
the stuff you use to bang on stone. They have the people to do the things that are important. But they have pads of paper if they need a pad of paper, and they all dress up.
In 13th century clothes?
Yes, they are all dressed up. So it's funny because in one of the documentaries, they showed the guy arriving in his car, dressed in his regular street clothes, And he parks his car in the parking lot, which is, they have a nice big parking lot. It's not paved or anything. It's all dirt and grass and whatever. But he parked his car, walked into the changing rooms, opened his little cabinet, and put on his 13th century garb for the day. It's adorable.
Cool. It's really cute.
Yes.
It's really nice.
And they have, I don't know if they make their own cloth. I doubt it. Like they probably just bought cloth and made.
See, that's the difference. I mean, the village Gaulois, that's not far from here, they do things like that. They make,
Right.
the idea is not specifically to construction, but to show general life at a particular time, which was, a long, long time ago. I saw just a documentary on television about it the other day. And that's the kind of place where, yes, they'll show you them weaving the cloth. They'll show them doing the this and doing the that. Whereas I see where here, the point is to do the construction itself.
Exactly. They discover how to do construction Middle Ages style, not how to weave cloth. That's not their point.
They're really not reenacting the entire aspect of life at the time. It's really the construction that's important. Yeah.
Right.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What was the thing that impressed you the most?
Oh, that's a good question. Impressed me the most. I think the fact that it's almost starting to look old. When you know it's not. And that's because they are very careful to do things. It has to look right. So I saw one of the guys explain the master builder, can't remember his name now, but the master builder insists he wants things to look right. And so they practiced putting together walls in a way that is appealing to the eye, And so it's both kind of very sturdy, very castle, you could defend this place if you had to. But it also looks pleasing to the eye. It's not like they left things rough and unfinished. So I really enjoyed that. And if we can take a little diversion on what it's like to visit. So you need a car to go.
Right.
I strongly recommend that you spend most of a day. Because if you only spend an hour or two, you're not going to be able to see the different workshops. And it really comes to life when they show you. Most French people who go, they will spend the whole day. They open at 9:30. We should say that they're not open year-round.
Oh, they're not?
They're not. They're open between late March, when French kids have their Easter vacation, until early November.
Okay.
When French kids end their fall vacation.
Basically the same months as many other attractions.
Exactly. Yes. Many attractions in France are only open late March to early November. And it's pegged on Easter.
And Toussaint.
So that can change a little bit. But those are the dates.
And during the week, is it open all the time?
Yes. So it's open every day, but sometimes even in season, they might close on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, or one or the other.
Okay.
So it's really important that you check their website to see and I would buy the tickets in advance because it is very popular,
You mentioned several times workshops. Can you sign up for them before you get there?
No.
When
you show up, they're going to give you a map and they're going to tell you when the workshops are.
Uh-huh.
And they're kind of done so that you can take several throughout the day. There's also a place where you can buy food.
Medieval food? Not quite, huh?
I don't remember. I don't think it was medieval. I think the names were kind of medievalish, but the actual food was very much nothing special for, it's not particularly expensive or particularly fancy, but you'll eat. They'll sell you food and drink. They do have a baker on site. Yeah, they have a baker. They have a gardener who's a gardener / medicinal plant kind of person. And I heard an interview with her and she was saying that, I mean, obviously, they want people to go visit the garden, right? It's an actual very medieval type of garden with a medicinal area, with a place, a big plot where they grow vegetables.
Do they sell some of the herbs and things?
They sell herbal teas and they sell seeds.
Ah.
Yes, for some of these medieval plants.
Okay.
But a lot of these plants are plants that will grow naturally in France. You don't need to grow them. They have the herbalist. She recognizes them and brings them on site. And she does kind of workshops about medicinal stuff. She did explain that typically a chateau like this would not have a big medicinal part to it. So usually that was more abbeys and monasteries that had a hospital attached to them. But since she has you there, a chateau normally did basic. But I mean, she grows the herbs that they would have used to help breathing issues, like big gashes,
Congestion, yeah.
fevers, things like that.
In the Middle Age, well, I do know, this is from my, reading even my mystery stories that take place in the 1200s and 1300s. I mean, what a way of learning about life. But I do know that that was a time when, well, of course, because I didn't know about other things, but really they knew a lot more than we do today about plants and what you could do with them and herbs,
Correct. Yeah. This lady says that the profession and the certification as a herborist got outlawed in France around 1947, I think she said, from memory.
Oh, really?
Because pharmacy took over.
Ah.
Okay. And really, there were a lot of people who were getting hurt by using plants incorrectly. And so she was very cautious. She was like, I urge you to not, because she said we have plants that are traditionally used for blood pressure. But she's like, but please also take your blood pressure medicine.
Yeah, exactly. And since I'm always interested in anything connected to bread, is it like the bakery, the oven that in stone that you can see them making the bread, or is it just?
I didn't see them making the bread, but they have a mill now. And the mill is not always open to the public because it's a water mill that they built from scratch as well.
Wow.
One of the things that it taught them is that, so you know how a mill works, right? You have this big silex grinding stone, and silex is a bear to work with because it's very, very hard. But they have this beautiful stone mill, and they actually mill some wheat locally. And the wheat that they mill, you hear things about, you had to put the wheat through 3 times and the stone had to go around 60 times a minute or whatever. No, they tested it and they realized that if you have a good stone, a good silex stone, it can rotate 30 times a minute and just 1 times through is enough to make perfectly good flour.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why you need to try things.
Right.
Because we have a lot of old mills in France, a lot of them. I've seen several myself, but none of them run. None of them are used, This one, not only does it run, but they built it from scratch.
You can't, I suppose when you go visit, you can't talk to the people who are working on the site. I would be interested to know what.
No, you can.
Did you ask anybody questions? Yeah.
Yes. You can ask questions. I think, this is optimal if you speak good French.
Right.
And not only good French, but also know a few technical words.
Okay.
Because if you don't know any construction words, like any tool names or things are going to go above your head quite quickly.
Right.
I'm not a builder of any sort, but I do know the names of tools, like basic tools. They will show you. And I think even if you don't speak a lot of French, spending the day and going to different workshops just to see what they're doing, because they're going to show you. The one that we sat through completely from beginning to end was the master builder, who was very interesting. And he was explaining the geometry of construction, because every construction site in the Middle Age had its own standard, like measurement.
Okay.
They had something that looks like a meter.
Right.
But they had the standard meter. They had the standard foot. They had the standard inch. And it could be slightly different from one
place to another.
Okay. So the master builder decided this is the standard, and they had it, they could refer to it. They could make more of that exact length. And the whole site uses those measures. And so he showed us how they use that. They showed us the use of the compass.
Mm-hmm.
You can make all sorts of things just with a ruler, a thing. They didn't have the levels at the time. So they used like weights to give them the plumb line. Just basic tools like that. And they can do all sorts of amazing things. And so he explained the geometry and he was kind of drawing things on the floor to show us. I mean, I liked geometry at school.
Me too.
But I didn't realize how much you could do with just a regular compass and a ruler.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is they didn't use a decimal system. They divided everything by 12. Because if you think about it, like if I give you a pizza and I tell you make 10 pieces, would you rather make 10 pieces or 12 pieces? What's easiest for you?
I don't know.
12 is easiest because you can do half and half and half and half.
That's true. That's true.
Everything was based on
12, which is what, of course, the inches system is. It's 12 inches. It's not the metric system. That's the Anglo system.
That's true. If you divide by 10, then it's more of a digital fingers type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's easier in everyday life to divide things by 12
How interesting.
because you can also do by 4 and by
2, 3, and 4.
there you go.
2, 3, 4, and 6.
There you go. That's it. So you can divide in your head easier. Doing fractions is easier if you go with a 12 than if you go with a 10. Although, yeah, well, that's just what they did.
It sounds like what would you call it? As a workshop or a conference? I don't know what you call it with the master builder. It sounds fascinating to me.
It was fascinating. And it went on a bit long.
Uh-huh.
And at first we were in the shade and then the sun turns. I mean, it was long enough that the sun turned and we were all in the sun because people are fascinated by this stuff. So they ask a lot of questions. So you had math teachers asking him, oh, show me that again, whatever. And so it was really very interesting. But the same way you have the garden lady doing a workshop. They all take turns doing workshops.
And talking to the public.
That was the deal from the beginning. Every one of them talks to the public.
Great.
At different times.
Did you see anybody? This is one of the other things, of course, because of my work and my own studies, but I suppose you were there at the point when it was no longer the case, but I'd love to see the people, the stonemasons, carving their mark into the stone because, of course, in those days, that's how you got paid. When they knew which stone was done by whom. Yeah.
Right. And they show you that. So the stone makers were paid by the stone, but like the carpenters were not. Carpenters were not paid by the piece.
No.
They were just paid as a team. And so carpenters don't mark, they don't sign, but they do put markings that show exactly where that piece of wood needs to go.
Right.
One of the things that they discovered at Guédelon, there's several things that they discovered that they didn't know exactly about. One of them is when you make a roof, you use trusses. Okay, this is a bit of visual something. But typically, imagine they're building a house in your neighborhood. You have a crane that comes and lifts the trusses to the roof. And if it's a construction site of any length, the crane is going to stay there a few days while they put all the trusses in place. And cranes actually bring trusses from the top and lower them, right? In the Middle Ages, they didn't do this. They used what's called a cage à écureuil. So it's a human hamster wheel is the way that you see it. And you see it at work at Guédelon. It's interesting. It's like a big wheel. They have a double one where two people work side by side. And they just walk in it and it activates the wheel and the ropes will just go around the big circumference of the wheel and get shorter and shorter and lift a stone up to 500 kilos they can do.
Up to 500 kilos?
Yes. And then the whole apparatus with the hamster wheels and all turns and they have a kind of a straight crane bit that will just go over the construction and drop things. And even the volunteers that they have can operate that because it's not very hard. You have to be able to walk in a wheel.
Right.
But it's not particularly difficult. You have to learn how to use the brake, of course. You have to stop it and then you reverse it to go down.
That's amazing. I have this vision of hamsters that are giant size.
And that's how they did everything.
Really?
With these types of apparatus, you need space because the crane has to be right up close to the wall and it will need to swing towards the wall, really, right up close. And so, since it's not coming from on top, you need to have all the trusses up on the roof.
Ah,
You need to, like, as soon as you have enough width of wall built, you start putting your trusses up and they're all pushed to the side in the right order. And then as your wall gets completed, you unstack them and you position them along the roof.
in talking, because you were there recently in the sense that it's almost finished, I'm just wondering, did anybody talk about not so much the accidents, which luckily didn't happen, but the idea that sometimes they had to redo something because it didn't work?
Yes, but because they tried everything on the small scale,
They anticipated.
yeah, they anticipated the problem. Yeah. And like with the trusses, they just used a beam in the center, a temporary beam on which they pushed the trusses off to the side because, again, only manual power. It has to be easy enough for a few guys to do this. Oh, another thing that's interesting is they don't call themselves ouvriers, but œuvriers.
What's the difference?
Une œuvre. So these are not just workers, but they are people who are creating une œuvre. Donc, c'est des œuvriers, pas des ouvriers. So, in English, you'd say a master craftsman
Right,
qui crée une œuvre.
right.
Yeah? But even today, they call themselves œuvriers because they're making things as they go along.
How much does it cost to go into the site, Annie?
I think it was 18 euros per person.
Okay, that's not too bad.
No, it's really not bad. There are a lot of people. If you go in the summer, on a weekend in the summer, it's very busy.
Is there a limit to the number per day that go in? Do you know?
Probably. I don't know. Probably. But it is a big site. I mean, you can walk around. This is like Montmartre. You can either follow just the tourist thing, like all the people walk in the same thing. But I really recommend you walk off of that and just go off a little bit, like go off 200 yards and you will see other things.
Hmm.
You just need to not be just right where everybody is. If you spend the whole day, they're going to give you a map. They're going to give you a thing that says when the workshops are. Go listen, watch, plan to have you can bring your picnic if you want.
There are places to sit and eat and a picnic?
Yes. It was really interesting because they had car chargers on site. So not everything is medieval. And they had, I remember 2 car chargers, but then I looked at it again yesterday when we were preparing for this. And now they have 6 plugs, including fast CCS and a CHAdeMO. So that's great. They are with it. They're with it. They're with it.
They're with it. Are there places to stay close by that you don't have to go to a place like Bourges or even Auxerre or not?
There are some, but I decided to stay in Bourges because I wanted to visit Bourges as well. But yes, there are some.
There are some.
Pretty close. No, it's not like Disneyland where it's right there. It's a few kilometers away. But yes, there are accommodations.
Little villages or places that have some things, some place to stay. And restaurants, I suppose, for the evening.
Yeah, probably. If you're in that area, you're not very far from Auxerre, for example. So you could also visit Auxerre, the village, and try the wine.
Right.
You could go to Bourges. You could go to Chartres.
You can actually go to Auxerre if you're coming the other way, which is actually a very beautiful old city center.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another one of mine. What do you think you learned the most from the visit there?
Personally, that people in the Middle Ages were very smart.
Oh.
They were very smart in different ways than us, but they were no dummies. They had very good systems. They knew how to use their tools. They worked with what was on hand. Like they had no cement. Yeah? So they had to make their own lime. Lime is a sort of material that if you mix it with sand and water, you can make a very good cement-like.
You basically have to cook limestone.
Exactly. And they do that on site. So they make an oven. It's a stone oven with a roof and everything. They shove enough wood in there to make it about 1,000 degrees.
Wow.
That has to go on for about 3 days. And at the end, the oven collapses in on itself and you let it cool off for days and days and days. And then in the center, you have chaux vive, which I don't know how to say that in English.
A live lime.
Okay, live lime.
Yeah.
Which is something that
you don't want to put your fingers in.
It will burn you, yes. It's very dangerous. But they take that and they put it in water barrels.
Mm-hmm.
And it just immediately the water evaporates. And then they put more water in there. And as long as it's covered in water, you can use that material for maybe 10 years. You can just grab some. At that point, it's not as dangerous. And you can go grab some and mix it. And they do all of that.
I've seen my husband actually do that, so I know about it. Yeah. It is fascinating.
Yeah.
I really like that. That's your reactions about. I mean, the Middle Ages is like we always have this vision from the way we're taught at school about people were stupid, didn't know anything. That's not true.
No, it's not true.
They didn't have certain technologies and things that we have today, and they may not have known a little bit that much about physics and the astronomical things, but they knew how to build. Look at the cathedrals that they built at the time,
Yeah. And they improved very quickly. They learned from one another and they passed the knowledge around. And they had very good systems where tradespeople would go from work site to work site and just show, like, oh, look, if you just you bend it this way a little bit, it's easier.
It's easier.
And then they just learned from doing.
The whole compagnon guild thing of traveling workers, it's just really fascinating. Do you think it would be possible to create a project like this somewhere else in France?
Well, in some of the documentaries and the book. So I based this whole conversation on a book that I bought, Guédelon, Nous bâtissons un château fort, Édition Ouest France. I'll try to put a link. If I find it on Amazon, I'll put a link in the show notes. There are also a ton of documentaries on YouTube because it coincided. The start of Guédelon, so 1997 is when they started the corporation. 1998 is when they opened to the public with very, very little. Apparently, even that first year, they had 55,000 people pay to come in and see it.
Wow.
Even though there was not very much. The first thing I had to learn how to do was to cut this particular stone.
Right.
Because quarries for a long, long time have been done with mechanical saws. And they had forgotten how to cut this, like had to extract stone, not using mechanical anything. They learned that and the people came to see that. And locals who are enthusiastic about the project, they go again and again and again, They just go back several times and they've seen it over the years. 2025, the chateau is done. It's painted. It's furnished.
Wow, I can't. Now I'm really interested in seeing it.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're starting on other bits.
To make a real village and life around it, basically.
Exactly. Because the people who started this, they've been working there since 1997, some of them. Some of them are ready to retire.
I bet.
They've rehired new people. It's a corporation. It's a construction company. Just 13th century style.
Do they give visitors a chance to wear clothes from the 13th century as part of the visit?
No, but I think you can buy stuff, especially for kids.
Uh-huh.
Kids love it.
I bet.
Kids love it because they can look around. I don't know if many kids would sit through the long kind of geometry that we took.
Right.
But there's other things that are more hands-on, like when they make the pottery, when they make the tools, they will demonstrate all of these things.
So they show all of these things, the pottery making, the tool making, all of that.
Oh, yes. And you go around to all the different areas where they make the tile. And it's amazing because the tile it looked like slate from a distance. I was like, oh, slate roof is interesting. I wonder where they get the slate. No, it's not. It's this weird dark clay that they have. And the clay is only 10 meters. It's 10 meters deep. You have to go down very far to get that clay. But again, in the Middle Ages, they had the knowledge that, yes, if you dig, that's what you find. And they would go find the good stuff. Yeah, they made everything.
They made their own plates and everything.
Yes, but like if you go to the cafeteria, you don't eat in plates that they made because that's not the point. It was not like really, they are studying construction techniques. And so in the cafeteria, there's lights. I mean, they don't use power tools, but they have electricity in the rest. I mean, you have bathrooms with lights in them, like, you know.
But, I mean, not to be a doomsayer, but if all things electric and electronic went out, these people would be able to survive without any problem.
Yes, it took a long time to build, but then they lasted very long. I listened to a documentary where the guy who made the live lime was talking about the advantages of using that as a. He was saying, now we make construction where we import materials from all over the world. They're trucked in from great distances. And they're really not designed to last more than, even in France, a house, after 100 years, it's starting to look really pretty bad unless you do maintenance, regular maintenance. Whereas these chateaus, you could build them for, hundreds of years without doing anything to them. We didn't talk about the wood production, but they use woods. Well, another thing that's interesting to me anyway is that when they bring in materials they bring in materials from as close as possible, but some of the things they get are from like 20 kilometers away.
Mm-hmm.
And they have horses that help them on site to move material and whatever, but they don't send the horses on a 40-kilometer return trip because they say it would be terrible for the horses because in the olden days they could switch horses. Nowadays we can't. And the point is not to be terrible to your horses. So for things that they bring in from a distance, like 20 kilometers or 25 kilometers away, it's tractors that bring them in. Yeah. They're not fundamentalists about things. If they know that in the olden days, all of this would be brought in by horses, but they only have 2 or 3 horses and they don't want to kill them. It's what it is.
So basically, the authenticity is really specific to the site.
To the construction part. Yes. They buy specific types because the woods around them, they use the woods around them, but they don't have all of the wood that they need for the different sorts of things that they build. So they bring in wood for like 20 kilometers away, which is how they would have done it at the Middle Ages.
Probably, yeah.
They could bring in materials from a certain distance, not from Brazil,
Right, exactly.
which is what we do today. You need fancy wood, you bring it from Brazil. They don't do that. They just go looking around the area.
In the region.
Yeah. And they find everything they need around the area. Beautiful place. I really recommend you go. And if you do, obviously, it's better if you watch some documentaries ahead of time, listen to this episode, look for photographs, get informed. I recommend you spend the whole day because if you could do it in less, okay? You could just zoom through in an hour and be out of there. That's feasible. But if you do that, you'll just get a few photos and not much else. If you spend the day, bring a picnic, it's a very pleasant thing to do.
It sounds like a great place to visit.
It's a great place to visit. And especially with kids, it gives you hope in people. And just to realize that our ancestors were not dummies. They weren't dumb. They were great people. They were smart. Smarter than us.
Smarter than us. About some things, definitely.
Sometimes you watch on the internet, you're like, oh my God, how stupid are we going to get?
Well, unfortunately or fortunately, having machines do things for you means you don't necessarily learn how to do them yourself.
Yeah.
And techniques, using your brain to calculate things keeps your brain alive too, so.
And also, it might take you 2 or 3 tries, but you will learn it, really. Whereas, doing it like first time, like, oh, ain't I great? Well, you use the power tool.
I think one of the things about watching a compagnon work is that these are people who have spent so many years knowing and learning that when they do it, it's wonderful to watch,
Yeah, it's magical.
It's magical.
Yeah. Thank you, Elyse.
You are quite welcome, Annie.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.
The Join Us in France travel podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2026 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.